what do you think are some practical steps that private citizens can take to reduce the polarization that's happening? So, for example, one thing I think about a great deal is just having friends with whom you disagree, but you're still friends and you don't
Yeah,
withdraw from that. Another is news intake. You know, check out multiple sources for your news. Social media, monitoring the impact that that may be having upon you.
right. Yeah,
What
those
else?
are all very good. Those are all very good suggestions. I basically boil it down to a few things because one of the things is because we cluster off so much and we live in communities that are very like-minded. Sometimes when you say, "Well, have friends outside of your religious, political, economic sort of circles," it's hard to do that. It's hard to do that.
Mhm.
Um, Especially when people are living and interacting so much with people who are like themselves. But so I think of it like this. One, here's a very basic thing. Um, Read the best expression of the opposing side's point of view.
Mm,
In other words, don't learn about ideas that you might disagree with from their opponents, from the idea of the opponents of the ideas. Learn about ideas from their proponents.
mm,
In other words, the people who are advancing the idea, read them.
mhm.
I'll take a super, super, super hot button. Let's just dive into something that's super hot button, especially in like Southern Baptist circles right now, even though I'm not Southern Baptist, I'm PCA. Um, Critical race theory.
Mm,
Okay. All of the Southern Baptist Seminary presidents united to condemn critical race theory. A lot of people are super curious about critical race theory. And here's how you should not learn about critical race theory by going to your favorite like-minded theologians to see what they say about critical race theory
mhm.
and think that you've learned about it. Instead, go and read critical race theorists and then go read their critics. Do you see what I'm saying? So, in other words, go to the proponent of an idea as opposed to an opponent of an idea. First, read the opponent, read the rebuttal, but first read what we're talking, read the advocates. And so what you end up doing in what you'll invariably end up with is a much more nuanced view of the issue.
Yeah.
And it also ends up humanizing your political opponents to a much greater degree than if you're exclusively reading from their critics. So that's one thing. The other thing you can do is defend the rights of others that you would like to exercise yourself.
Mm,
And I don't mean that just if you're a lawyer watching. I mean, if you're on social media and you see somebody, a news story that your friends are talking about where a political opponent is being treated unfairly, stand up for the political opponent. You don't have to agree with their underlying ideas, but you can stand up against the unfair treatment. And what ends up happening is that it it penetrates groupthink
mm,
and it creates real bonds of fellowship with people on the other side of the aisle. People are grateful when those who disagree with them stand up on points of common principle.
mm,
And then the other thing is, to the extent that you're engaged in, let me put it this way: if you are a very politically interested person, don't let politics be a hobby.
mm,
Make it a practice. So, in other words, if you're super politically interested, there's a lot of people who spend an enormous amount of time treating politics almost like it's like it's SEC football. Like, I'm going to learn everything about the different players. I'm going to fight about it on the message boards. I'm going to listen to it on the radio, as opposed to saying, hey, what about, there's a local zoning issue or a local issue regarding, funding of the local police department, or and then just getting engaged with actual human beings in political activity as
mhm.
opposed to thinking and opining about it. I
Mm,
think it's one of the things that does when you get engaged. So just super basic stuff. I spent 6 years on the school board of my kids' Christian school. That's politics of a kind, it's governance of a kind. And one of the first things you learn when you're involved in any kind of political endeavor, as opposed to opining about it constantly, is that this stuff is complicated and hard.
mhm,
It's not easy. And all of the people who are running around going, these idiots,
mm.
if they only knew, if they had only had any bit of courage of their convictions, then we could, then you actually get involved and you're like, oh, okay, so there's these competing constituencies, and there's these competing interests, and there's this really complicated budgetary angle. Yikes. and one of the things I think is political hobbyism is a little bit dangerous. Political participation is often quite humbling.